Humerus. Proximal epiphysis, diaphysis, distal epiphysis, right? The one bone you could confuse the humerus with is the femur. A couple ways you can tell it different though. Well, there's our rounded head, not much of a neck. And the big thing, this hole right here, supracondylar foramen. We don't see that in the femur. In fact, we don't see it in most humans. A little fun fact on the history of biology. When Darwin was writing on Origin of Species, one of the things he mentioned was the supracondylar foramen. We find it in a lot of mammals, but humans generally don't have it. However, a small percent of the population will show this. And he used this as an example of how we evolved from other life forms. So supracondylar foramen is a big giveaway. Let's go back up to our proximal epiphysis. We have our head. And on that head, we've got a small rounded elevation, and next to it a larger rounded elevation. Lesser tubercle, greater tubercle. And there's a groove going between them. Now remember, groove and sulcus can be used interchangeably. This groove going between the tubercles is given two names. Intertubercular groove, meaning the groove between tubercles is called the intertubercular groove, when inter means between. Right, pretty easy. The other name, bicipital groove. Your biceps has two tendons attaching to the shoulder. One of them goes right through here. Now when we get down here, we get to the only thing that really tends to cause confusion for students. We have a ridge here and a ridge here. This ridge is called the pectoral ridge, and it's more medial. This ridge is called the deltoid ridge, and it's more lateral. And again, use your own bodies. So if you look at your own arm, you've got your pectoralis major coming up to the medial aspect of your forearm, and your deltoid's on the outside, lateral. So you're going to see the exact same thing with the cat. Makes it really easy. Because you look at those pictures, you're like, oh, how do I keep them straight? But you look at your own body. Knock out a couple hundred push-ups. And that'll be easy to remember as the pain flares in where the muscles attach. All right, let's get down here. And then we get to see some of the things we expected to see. Flared expansions that allow for better articulation. One lining up with the head, which would be medial, so medial condyle, lateral condyle. On the medial condyle, we've got an elevation called the medial epicondyle, and above that, of course, the supracondylar ridge over the supracondylar foramen. And on the lateral condyle, we have an elevation, lateral epicondyle, right? Just like you would expect. But we also have some articulating surfaces here that are given special names. And if you use your imagination as you look at it, these surfaces look like the head and body of a pawn from a chessboard. The head is called capitulum, which means head, right? If you chop off someone's head, you decapitate them. So the head of the pawn is called capitulum. The body is shaped like an hourglass or a spool, and the term for that is trochleum. This matches up with the bones articulating here. So if you think about it, when you use your ulna, you're extending and flexing your forearm. It's like the hinge on a door. And this looks like the hinge on a door. So that's for the ulna. The old Roman Colosseum, does he die or does he live? Or are you pouring a margarita? Radius leads with that. Rotational movement, your head rotates on your neck. So capitulum for the radius. So when we put the ulna here, for example, you can see it sitting right on here like this. It comes in, and then this projection is the coronoid process of the ulna. It's going to slide into a depression above the trochlea called the coronoid fossa. And of course, on the back end, we had the olecranon, which slides into the olecranon fossa. But that's why you can't touch your hand to your shoulder if you just flex your arm. If you go ahead and just flex your arm and don't bend your wrist, you almost chop your head off. How's this? But without bending your wrist, you can't touch your hand to your shoulder because of the coronoid process sliding into the coronoid fossa. It's not because of your gigantic bicep. Definitely not because of that. Here we see the radius on the capitulum. Flex our forearm. It slides into a depression here. That depression would be the radial fossa. Make sense? And again, that's why sometimes looking at articulated stuff makes it easier. All right, so the radius and ulna, they look a lot different. One thing about them, they're like the number 69 or a DNA molecule. They're anti-parallel. Proximal epiphysis is small on the radius, big on the ulna. Distal epiphysis is large on the radius and small on the ulna. Okay, so that's why it's like this number 69. The ulna is easy because it's the only one that's got a U on it, like ulna. We have our notch that fits over the trochlear given 3 different names. It can be called the ulnar notch, or the trochlear notch, or because it looks like a crescent moon, semi-lunar notch. And again, on the day of the exam, I'll take any one of those 3 names if I tag it and say name this notch. Behind it, we've got the olecranon, and in front of it, we've got our coronoid process. Right on the side here, we've got another depression. That's where the head of the radius fits into. That's called the radial notch. Now, along the length, we're going to have a ridge facing the radius. And for the radius, we're going to have a ridge facing the ulna. Those ridges allow ligament to hold the 2 bones together, and they're called the interosseous ridges or interosseous crests. And the ligament that holds them together is their interosseous membrane. All right? Now we get to the end, we got a little spike-like projection. That'll point under your pinky. That's the styloid. Wherever you see spike-like, styloid. Now our radius, we have the head here. We got a depression for the capitulum right there, the radial fossa. This is one of your 3 ball and socket joints. Shoulder, hip, and the radius attaching to the capitulum. The rest of this is roughly like a circle. So this is the circumferential surface of the head of the radius. Am I going to ask that one on the test? Well, we'll see. All depends on what, no. That's one I wouldn't ask, but that's where the terminology comes from. Now you might get that in human anatomy. Behind it we got a rounded elevation, radial tuberosity. And now we get down here, we can see a spike, styloid process. That spike points towards your thumb. And if you use your imagination, this kind of looks like the pads of my hand and my thumb. We rotate it, and you, oops, okay, have it go through some kind of seizure. You end up with knuckles and thumb. And that helps you tell right from left. Right from left is just knowing all the fine details. I know students always panic about right from left. We ask that because it does see how well you really know it. It's not going to be all of the exam. And it might be name this bone and tell me if it's right or left. So even if you don't get the side right, you still get half credit. And the worst thing, even if I just say, give you this bone, what side of the body is it from? You got a 50-50 shot, right? We're not working with squid here. So that helps a little bit.